Morning.
Morning, Janie.
I don't know if we have any bird watchers out here this morning. Anybody a bird watcher? Well, now I know. We have one. Okay. I'm not much of a bird watcher, although there's some beautiful birds in the world, especially as I remember the first time seeing some in the wild in Israel, some greenish colored ones, and of course at the zoos I've seen some parrots and some beautiful colored parrots. But there's some other birds that are very beautiful that often go overlooked. And here's a couple of pictures of some of these birds. Some of them are, this one in particular and the next one are from Malaysia, but there's some from Europe and the States and even Canada. These are all from the same species group of what's known as Kingfishers. This is what you'll see if you go to our lakes. They're not as bright and colorful, but similar type of bird, similar activity. As a matter of fact, they're protected in Canada because fishermen used to kill them and hunt them. They're fairly susceptible as well. They make their nests along the shorelines in holes in the ground, in burrows, and what they would do to annoy the fishermen is they were really good at fishing themselves. And so they would collect a lot of the fish when they were smaller and there'd be less fish for the fishermen. They would hover over the waters and just swoop down, or they'll perch on a branch, and when the fish come, they swoop down and catch the fish. There's a reason they've given the name Kingfishers. And so now they're protected. I mean, they do kind of what fishermen do. They hover over the water in a boat, and fishermen will stand perched by the side of a river or a lake and try and catch the fish. We talk about fishermen, and the reason why I bring this up is because Jesus, he connected with some fishermen back in his day. As a matter of fact, 1/3 of the apostles, 4 out of the 12, we know of were fishermen. Peter, Andrew, James, and John, they were fishermen. And some of the greatest writers of the Bible were some of those apostles. You have a number of books, 7 in total. John wrote 5, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John in Revelation. And Peter's responsible for 1st and 2nd Peter. And some believe Peter even helped Mark with the book of Mark. And so even in your New Testament, out of your 27 books, 7 of them at least were authored by these fishermen. Okay, so what do we know about them? Well, when they first met Jesus, there's a story. We've been going through the beginning of the Gospels. Matthew and Mark both tell us just very briefly of when Jesus called them. And if we're to look in Mark chapter 1 and Matthew chapter 4, we're not given any details. It's just kind of generally, this is how he found them. He was walking along the Sea of Galilee, and the only biggest freshwater body of fresh water in Israel, and it's here where Jesus passed along and he found them, and it says, they were fishermen, and Jesus said, "Follow me, and I'll make you fish for people." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. And it just kind of gives a summary in both these cases. Now, Luke is the only one that actually gives us the details of what happened here, and the details are, believe it or not, very important. And so you might miss this. We all probably know the story. Jesus said, "Come follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men, and I'll make you fish for people." But actually there's some details in what happened. And to fully understand and grasp what happened this day, we're going to take a look at this. Now, Jesus began his ministry, and I'm going to show you, just a reminder, I showed this 2 weeks ago. Jesus began his ministry. He lived in Nazareth. And so you see number 1 there. He came down and he was baptized down here, and he was tempted out here. And then he went back up and he changed the water to wine at Cana. And then he came down for the festival in Jerusalem. And that's what we talked about a couple of weeks ago, where he turned over the tables of the money changers. He tried to get people to recognize their sinful hearts. And it's there we're told he performed a number of miracles. And people from up here in Galilee would have all gone down here. They do that once a year, sometimes 3 times a year. But for this Passover, this is the biggest festival for the Jews. So they would have seen Jesus doing it. As a matter of fact, John tells us, some who had seen Jesus performing miracles down here had gone up and they had spread the word. And that's why when Jesus comes back, he goes through Samaria, meets the woman at the well, stays in Samaria a few days, comes back up to Cana, and that's where the official whose son was ill came to meet Jesus. And Jesus said, go, and on his way home, he realized it was at that hour his son was restored, his health was restored. Okay, so that's what's happening. Jesus goes back to Nazareth, where he's rejected by his own people. His own village rejects him, and so he moves to Capernaum. Now, this was by the Sea of Galilee. Here's a picture of the Sea of Galilee today, and this is from the north side, kind of looking down, and you can see how beautiful it is. Jesus was in one of these little villages, so probably along the seashore, just like you might see there. Here's a picture from the west, so Jesus might have been in Capernaum up along here, and that's the Sea of Galilee. So you kind of see the Sea of Galilee here. It's low. Now Jesus might not have been here a lot, coming from Nazareth up on the mountains. It's not just a quick hop, skip, and a jump. This is maybe a day's journey. And so Jesus now moves, and he's living in Capernaum. And that's where he meets these fishermen. Now, here's where the story gets interesting. Luke tells us something. Luke tells us that as a crowd was pressing in on Jesus, okay, so Jesus is there in Capernaum. He's by the side of the Sea of Galilee. As the crowd was pressing in on Jesus to hear God's word, he was standing by the lake, and he saw 2 boats at the edge of the water, at the edge of the lake. The fishermen had left them there and were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats that belonged to Simon, and he asked him to put out from the land, and then he sat down and was teaching the crowds from the boat. Now, this is some very important details. Because, I don't know about you, Jesus said he was the Messiah. He had been revealing himself. People believed he was the one to come. But what did they really know about the Messiah? You see, this isn't the first time that Peter met Jesus. As a matter of fact, when Jesus was down south, Peter and his brother Andrew were down south, and we read that when John the Baptist had told Andrew, he found his own brother. Andrew found his own brother Simon. He told him, we have found the Messiah, which is the Christ. That means Messiah. And he brought Simon to Jesus. And when Jesus saw him, he said, you are Simon, son of John. You will be called Cephas. Jesus renames him. Okay, so that happened before this, it appears. So why is it that there is a crowd of people trying to hear Jesus' words, the words of life, words of truth? Such an important message. There's crowds of people there, but these guys are over there washing their nets. They don't even care. They don't want to be crowding in with the crowd. You would have thought, hey guys, did you hear Jesus is in town? Let's fish next week. As a matter of fact, they had been fishing all night and hadn't caught anything. Don't you think they would say, hey, I see Jesus. Let's go in a little bit early. Maybe Jesus, let's go find him. We're not catching anything. It's been all night. Let's just go right now. But no. And even with Jesus standing right there with them, they have their backs turned. You think they'd say, let's wash our nets later. Even if they needed the fish. We didn't catch anything. Let's wash the nets later. Let's go take advantage of Jesus. I mean, if there's a big name coming to your city, and there's a teacher who usually charges a lot of money, or Jesus never charged money, but in our day and age, and there was a free concert, a free opportunity to go, many of us would be like, let's go. Hey, did you hear so-and-so's in town? If you respected them, and you couldn't wait to meet them, and there was only it wasn't like there was a crowd around Jesus. They weren't talking about millions of people, maybe in the thousands, hundreds. You would think they would put their nets down and they would go and learn from Jesus. So why didn't they? It's not much different for us today. And I don't know why they didn't. Maybe they were worried, we got to get some fish. We need to pay the taxes. Maybe they were worried, oh man, you know what? We got to get fish to feed our families. And those are legitimate things they have to do. But if they truly understood who it was standing there, the man who changed water to wine, the man who healed the official's son without even seeing him, the man who they would later see feeds 5,000 people from just a few loaves of bread and some fish. If they truly understood that, They would have put their stuff down, and they would have gone, and they would have sat at the feet of Jesus and said, Lord, tell us more, and they would have followed him. Because other people follow Jesus, people that we don't read Jesus saying, come follow me. People followed him. There was a crowd there following him. What about us? Jesus is with us every day, and we have his word with us every day. How often are you listening and sitting at the feet of Jesus? What's more important to you? We don't have nets to wash. Some of us might, but not all of us have nets to be washing. But maybe we have other things distracting us. Time to put down our nets, put down our cell phones, put down those distractions, and start to sit at the feet of Jesus. Jesus warns that there will be distractions for people. There will be things we worry about more than him, and will draw our attention away. I want to remind you of the parable of the sower. Some of the seed falls amongst the thorns, and you know what the thorns are described as? The worries and cares of this life. And what else? Stuff. The deceitfulness of wealth and the desire for other things. If you look at statistics and how wealthy of a nation we are, how wealthy we are compared to the rest of the world, we are amongst the wealthiest. We are rich. We have so much time. You turn a little tap and water comes out. You don't have to go and get your water and boil it, and by the way, go cut the wood. We have so many luxuries. But yet, we seem to have less and less time for Jesus. Do you know what God warned? This isn't new. God warned his people in the Old Testament. Deuteronomy chapter 8. They forgot how poor they were as they were slaves down in Egypt. And he said, I'm about to bring you to a new land. And he says, when you eat and are full, and you build beautiful houses to live in, and your herds and flocks, your bank accounts grow, and your silver and gold multiply, and everything else you have increases. That sounds like a lot of us. Be careful that your heart doesn't become proud and you forget the Lord your God. Isn't that what could easily happen to us? I don't want to be too hard on these guys. I'm not exactly sure why they weren't interested in Jesus at this time or why they were distracted. But Jesus, I think, knew they were. Because what Jesus does next is Jesus doesn't wait for them to come to him. Jesus goes to them. Jesus sees this boat, and he gets in the boat, and he says to Simon and his brother Andrew, put out to water a little bit. So that's like if there was a big crowd in a farm field, then there's a pickup truck, and Jesus steps in the back of the truck and says to the owner, can you drive me around the front of the crowd so they can hear me better? He gets in the boat, and Peter and Andrew, they go out in the boat, and they're out there, and Jesus begins preaching. Now, I would love to see if we could just have a glimpse of, if this was recorded, what they were doing. They must have been tired. Were they just sitting there kind of looking out, thinking about the fish they didn't catch? Were they really listening to his words at that point? Not really sure what they were doing. But we do know that Jesus finishes speaking, and then Jesus has a message for them. You see, even if they weren't paying attention to Jesus' sermon, his teaching to the people, Jesus turns and has a message for them. And look what happens next. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, put out into deeper water and let down your catch. Master, Simon said, we've worked hard all night and we've caught nothing. When he says that, you can almost picture his eyes rolling. Put out to deeper waters. You're a rabbi. You're a carpenter. There's a big difference, By the way, fishermen, they understand each other. If James and John were there, they understand. They have a lingo. I've been learning this from Pete, some of the fishermen's lingo. If you say, did you catch, has it been good fishing this morning? If it was good fishing, they'll either be silent or they'll say no. Did you catch, a big fish? And usually if they got a big fish, they don't want you to know where they got it from. Nothing special, right? How big was the fish? Big fish, even though it might have been small. They have their own lingo and jokes, and there's a lot of things, but fishermen talk. So, here's Jesus. He's a carpenter. Well, an architect, working with wood and building materials. He's not a fisherman. He's not one of them. He came new to this city. Who do you think you are? You think you know about fishing? You haven't grown up on the lake. They know each other. They know how things work. And so maybe he rolled his eyes when Jesus said, put out to the deep water. Okay, at your word. At least he had a respect for Jesus. And so they put out to deep water. And Jesus says, let down your nets, and they let down their nets. And then Jesus' message to Peter and Andrew comes to fruition. We read that they caught such a great number of fish, their nets began to tear, and they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they filled both boats so full that they began to sink. James, John, get out here! And that implies, that there was even more fish, that it wasn't just one swoop. That they came out and that there were so many fish they needed more nets, and they just kept filling their boats. You don't think there was a message in there for Simon that day? Simon, you fished all night, you did it your way. How did that work out for you? If you were sitting at the feet of Jesus, how do you think life would work out for you? When Jesus met Nathanael, Philip calls Nathanael and he comes. Rabbi, Nathanael said, how do you know my name? Nathanael asked. Before Philip called you, Jesus said, I saw you when you were under the fig tree. You are the Son of God, the King of Israel. But Jesus says, you believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree. You will see greater things than this. Truly I tell you, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. If Peter and Andrew had only fully understood who Jesus really was, God in the flesh, the one who made fish, the one who gives you life, the one who sustains your life, who gives you the sunshine and the rain. And tomorrow, if we wake up and there's no sun, we're all dead. Jesus gives us life every day. He's the one. He's the one that says, look at the lilies of the field. They don't worry, and God clothes them. And the birds of the air, and they don't worry, and God feeds them. If we only remembered his words and what's truly most important. And then he says, seek first the kingdom, and all these things will be given to you. And he showed them greater things as he calmed the storm and healed, as he walked on the water and amazed them. They saw greater things, just as Stephen, he sees Jesus standing at the right hand of God. And as he's transfigured before their very eyes, 3 of these 4 guys were there, the inner circle. The greater things that they were able to see when they finally put their nets down and walked with Jesus. And you don't think that Jesus has greater things for us to see? When you finally put down all those distractions with the extra time that we have, I'm not saying don't have any time for ourselves. You need that. But I think in this day and age we have far too much time for ourselves, and we justify more and more time for ourselves, and we have no time for Jesus. He's right there every day calling to us. And we don't look because we're so busy cleaning our nets, doing our own thing. If only we would pick up his word. If only we would just listen to the power. His teachings are unparalleled in history. Jesus, his word, grows the immature, moves the unmovable, changes the unchangeable. The word of God is powerful, living and active. And how often it's sitting here in our back pockets, on our shelves, and how often are we in it? How often are we in prayer talking to Jesus? How often are we walking with Jesus? How often are we listening? And then when you put into practice as they did, when you put into practice that daily walk with Jesus, watch what he will show you. Some of you who have been walking with him a long time, people come to the church and they see people, they say, I don't understand how they have such a strong faith. And you say, we want to see what you see. Well, some of that comes, and each one's going to be unique. Where you see Jesus walking with you in your life. The things he will show you. The things he will teach you. That's what he does. We have been given his story, his spirit, and his word. If only we would learn them, teach them to others, and understand that he's been calling us, turning us from darkness to light, and he's been trying to get us to take our time to follow him. Why? So that we can have an eternity with him, and it's important that he wants us to become his fishermen. To go out into the world, accepting him as the king, and that bird that I showed you, the kingfisher, he wants us to become kingfishers. Rescuing people, not beating them over the head and putting a net on them and dragging them in, but finding the lost sheep of Israel, finding the lost sheep in this world of his flock and bringing them back to him of their own accord. But going out and trying to help catch the lost and bringing them from the powers of evil and the powers of darkness that are out there. And so that's what Jesus calls us to do. And so what Jesus said to those fishermen that day, follow me, and I will teach you how to fish for people. That is the same message Jesus has for us today. Follow me, and I will teach you how to fish for people. Are we becoming disciple makers? As Jesus leads us and disciples us, are we learning from the Master? Just like they learned to put their nets down to trust him, are we learning to go into this world and turn hearts from darkness to light? Help the seed that's distracted in the thorns, to pull out the thorns, to help relocate the seed into good soil so that people will be rescued and know Jesus and have the gospel, the good news for eternity. Let's stand as we sing our final hymn.